Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Alhamdulillah, this is our second installment of the Khulafa Rashidin series. And alhamdulillah, we're going to be talking about Umar bin Khattab radhiallahu anhu today. So just a reminder, if you guys remember last week, I gave you guys, I want to give another bashara, another bushra, another glad tidings for the gathering that we have gathered today. And if you guys remember, we talked about the angels that are roaming around. So these angels are malaika sayyara, and sayyara, we know that the meaning of sayyara is a car, but they didn't have cars back then, right? So we know that the meaning of sayyara is actually from the word sayr or masir, which means to travel, to go from one place to another. So sayyara is something that travels from one place to another, frequently travels or moves from one place to another. So that's basically what sayyara. So these angels, again, they're going around looking for nur, looking for majalis of dhikr, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being mentioned, where the Prophet ﷺ is being mentioned, where ayat of Quran are being discussed, where the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ are being discussed. Uh, Wherever something like that occurs, the angels go there to that place and they flood to that area. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised the angels and tells the angels that these people are forgiven. That these people are forgiven from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning all our small deeds, our minor sins, or sorry, not small deeds, minor sins are forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq, inshallah, to be of those who sit in these majalis of dhikr, inshallah. The slides are moving, right? Rehan, someone in the chat box. Okay, alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair, Abdullah, brother Abdullah. Okay, so we have here, we talked about this also, and just as a quick recap, inshallah, we talked about the hadith of Prophet ﷺ where there's 30 years of Khilafah, and then after that there will be the muluk, will there be different kings and kingship, and we're in that period, and then there's actually two types. One type of kingship where the people were actually, the kings had some fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then after that a time where there'll be dhalimeen, there will be oppressors, and we're in that era now. After that, the Khilafah will return, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so this is the 30 years of Khilafah, and again, the who are the righteous Khulafa Rashidin, who are these rightly guided successors of the Prophet ﷺ. So you have Abu Bakr Siddiq, which we talked about him last week. Umar bin Khattab, which we will touch upon today, his life today, inshallah. Uthman ibn Affan, radiallahu anh, Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu anh, Al-Hasan ibn Ali, radiallahu anh, and Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah. So these are the six Khulafa Rashidin that are considered as the Khulafa Rashidin. In one of the hadith, actually the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions that he says, "Ana madinatul ilm wa Abu Bakr asasuha," meaning that I am the city of knowledge, and Abu Bakr Radha is the asas, meaning the foundation of this Medina, of the city of knowledge. And then the Prophet ﷺ goes on and say, "Wa Umar hitanuha," and Umar Radha is the walls. Okay, so you have the foundation, and then you have the walls of this Madinatul Ilm, this city of ilm, of knowledge. And wa Uthman saqfuha, and Uthman Radha is the roof, or the ceiling or the roof of this Medina. Wa Ali babuha, and Ali Radha is the door of this Medina, of this city. So we see how beautiful this hadith, talking about the merits of the four Khulafa Rashidin, the first four of the Khulafa Rashidin. Inshallah, we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna be talking about Umar radiallahu anh, and Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh. Again, I can't do justice to all the whole life. I mean, there's so much out there. If you go out to the scholars, mashallah, the ulama have done beautiful, in-depth uh, studies on the life of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, and you have many series out there. Some of them numbering 15, 20, 25. Different sessions on just the life of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh. So I'm going to try my best, inshallah, to compact everything, to put everything together in a period of 45 minutes, inshallah. 45 minutes to an hour, around that. Okay, inshallah. So we have Umar bin Khattab radhan. Who was he? We know that Umar radhan was born in Makkah Mukarramah about 13 years after the incident of the elephant, meaning he was 13 years younger than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That means putting him at the age of 27 years old when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam first received revelation and started propagating Islam. So 27 years old, he was very young at that time. Okay, he was born into the Banu Adi clan of the Quraysh tribe, and this is also, he shares the same clan as Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl was actually one of his uncles, not his immediate uncle, but it was one of his uncles. So he was related, closely related to Abu Jahl, and we're going to learn about a little bit about that a little bit later, inshallah. Um, we know that Umar Radhan as a youth, he was a shepherd for his father Khattab, and he would be a shepherd for his aunts also. He would take care of the animals, and his father was actually a very mean and rough and tough person, and he gave him a very tough upbringing, and he often treated Umar Radhan really harshly and badly. For example, if Umar Radhan did his job and he did good and he took care of the animals, uh, then his father Khattab would give him a handful of dates or a few dates to eat, for example. Okay, and if he did not, he would go hungry, and not only that, but his father Khattab would beat him harshly for not doing his duty. So you see how his upbringing of Umar Radan, getting that rough upbringing, and that also helped to mold him to what he became. And we see that Umar also had a toughness to him as a result of his upbringing, but he used that toughness uh, for the sake of Islam. And when he became Khalifa, during his Khilafah, he used that toughness. That toughness was against the kuffar, and he became soft for the Muslims. Now, one of the things about Umar Radhan is that he was appointed as the Safir, the ambassador of the kuffar, of the mushrikeen of Quraysh, because of his wisdom, even though he was young in age, but he was wise. And because of his wisdom, they appointed him as a Safir, as the ambassador, the spokesperson of the Quraysh. Okay, and also we know his Khilafah was the longest of all the Khulafa. Uh, some say 16 years, about 16 years, 16 and a half years that it lasted. Going first of all to Umar Radhan, his family, we know that his father and mother, we don't know too much about his mother, but his father did not, I believe he passed away before Islam, so he did not become Muslim. But we don't know much about that, but we know about his children. So out of the children, he had I believe, over 12 children. But from them, there was three that are the most widely known, and you have, for example, Abdullah ibn Umar, radiallahu anh, the famous companion of the Prophet ﷺ, a very knowledgeable man, even at a young age. There was a famous hadith where he says the Prophet ﷺ, he was in Medina Munawwara, and the Prophet ﷺ asked the Sahaba that which tree resembles the mu'min the most. And there were great Sahaba like Abu Bakr Siddiq, Radhan, Umar bin Khattab, Radhan, different Sahaba, the great Sahaba were there in that gathering. And Abdullah bin Umar Radhan was also in the gathering, but he was a young boy. Remember, I think he was 10 years old when he did Hijrah to Medina Munawwara. So he was very young when he went to Medina Munawwara. So he's sitting in this gathering, and he tells his father later, after the gathering was over, he tells him that I felt shy. I knew the answer, and but I felt shy. I knew the answer was the date palm tree, but I felt shy to respond because there were other greater Sahaba, older in age and more, closer to the Prophet. They were sitting there, and I couldn't respond. Umar Radhan responds to by saying that if you had uh, responded, if you had given the answer, it would have been more valuable to me than such and such of wealth. Meaning that he would have been so proud of him that his son was the one to give the answer to the Prophet ﷺ and would be the one. And this, shows us the encouragement that Umar would give to his children. He was encouraging them, and this is one of the traits of a good father. And Allah make us, inshallah, good parents, inshallah ta'ala. So you have Abdullah bin Umar radhiallahu anh. Also, the Prophet ﷺ says about Abdullah radhiallahu anh that he is a great ni'ma rajul. He is a great man if he would pray tahajjud. And Abdullah ibn Umar radhiallahu anh was told this by his sister Hafsa radhiallahu anha. And after that day, once he was told this, he never stopped praying tahajjud prayer. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq, inshallah, to be of the people who pray tahajjud. So a person can reach a certain level with their knowledge, with their merits, with with their akhlaq, but to even go higher is a person should be praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the middle of the night. Another child of the Prophet, of Umar bin Khattab radhiallahu anh, was Hafsa bint Umar radhiallahu anha, and she was famously known as actually the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we know that Umar radhiallahu anh, his daughter Hafsa radhiallahu anh, she was married before that. She was a widow when she married the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but her husband died in the Battle of Uhud. He was martyred. He got shahada in the Battle of Uhud. So Umar radhan, he went to Abu Bakr Siddiq radhan, and he asked him. He actually offered his daughter in marriage to Abu Bakr Siddiq radhan. And before I go further, again, this tells us, that there's no shyness. If you see a good match for your son or your daughter, you shouldn't be shy, even if it's from the woman's side, to be the first to approach. If there's a suitable a pious man in the community, there's nothing wrong with being the first to approach. So Umar Radhan goes to Abu Bakr Siddiq Radhan, and he approaches him, and he actually offers his daughter in marriage to Abu Bakr Siddiq Radhan, who actually does not respond. He just keeps silent. He does not say a word. So then Umar Radhan, next he goes to Uthman Radhan, and he offers his daughter in marriage to Uthman Radhan, because Uthman, after the Battle of Badr, Uthman Radhan's wife Ruqayya Radhanha, the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, actually had passed away. So he was mourning the death of his wife still. But Umar Radhan offered his daughter in marriage, and Uthman Radhan politely declined because he was still mourning. Um, the Prophet, Umar Radhan, he was saddened by this, by the response that he got. Abu Bakr Radhan did not respond, and Uthman Radhan politely declined. So he went and he complained to the Prophet ﷺ about this, and he said that this is what happened. Rasulullah ﷺ assured him with the words. He said that don't worry about it. He said that Hafsa radhiallahu anha will marry a man better than Uthman and Abu Bakr, meaning a man better than Abu Bakr and Uthman. And Uthman will marry a lady or a woman that is better than Hafsa radiallahu anha. So we find out that the Prophet ﷺ, actually what he meant is a few days after, he himself proposed to Umar radhiallahu for the hand of Hafsa radiallahu anha and married. So he was the man that was better than Abu Bakr and Uthman, and the woman that was better than Hafsa radiallahu anha for Uthman radhiallahu was the other daughter, Kulthum radhiallahu anha, of the Prophet ﷺ, where he married her. And we're going to talk about that inshallah next week when we get to the topic of Uthman ibn Affan radhiallahu anhu, inshallah. So this is Hafsa radhiallahu anha, and then we have Asim ibn Umar radhiallahu anhu. This is the third famous child of Umar radhiallahu anhu, and Asim is the one. He was the one who actually married the girl in the story of the milk, and we'll talk about that inshallah when the time comes. So we see that these are the three children. Actually, I'll just talk about it now, inshallah. So we know that Umar bin Khattab, he would secretly go out in the middle of the night, and he would go and check upon the Muslims, make sure everything's okay. And one night he was passing by a house, and as he's passing by, he heard a woman talking to her daughter, and they were, you could say it was a little bit louder conversation. The mother was kind of reprimanding her daughter, and she was telling her that mix the water into the milk. So they would sell milk in the city, and she was telling her daughter to mix water into the milk, and the daughter actually responded by saying that the mother said that don't worry, Umar Radhan is not here to see you. So the daughter responded by saying, what about the order? Umar, the Khalifa, Umar Radhan has ordered us not to mix anything, any water or anything with the milk. So she says, the mother says basically that Umar Radhan is not here to watch you. He's not here to see you. So the daughter actually says, what about the Lord of Umar Radhan? Meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching. So because of this taqwa, Umar Radhan actually asked his servant, I believe it was Aslam radiallahu anh, he asked him, he says that mark the house and tomorrow find out more about this family, find out about this daughter, who she is, if she's single or not, what's going on. And they find out that she was not married. So Umar radiallahu anh goes to his children and he says to his children that who amongst you wants to get married to a pious woman? And if you do not want to, if none of you guys want to, then I'm going to go and marry her. And so Asim, the son of Umar Radhan, he actually consented to get married, and he actually married this daughter, this pious woman. And from their lineage came Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah. And again, we'll talk about him, inshallah, when the time comes. So some of the nicknames, just like last week, we talked about the nicknames of Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anh. So Umar radhiyallahu anh is also has some famous nicknames. For example, one of them is Abu Hafs. Okay, Abu Hafs, and the meaning of Hafs. So first of all, you have Hafsa radhiyallahu anha, which is the daughter of Umar radhiyallahu anh, and that's most likely why he was called Abu Hafs. But another meaning of why he was called Abu Hafs is that one of the meanings of Hafs is a lion. So there are, when there's a number of different names for one thing. So for example, the lion has 300 some names in Arabic. Okay. So it's not just Asad. Okay. There's different names. One of them is Hafs. Okay. And that tells us actually in Arabic, when there's more than one name, or the more names you have for a certain thing, that shows the importance of that thing. So this means that he's the father of bravery, the father of fierceness. Okay, that is Abu Hafs, the lion, basically Abu Hafs. So that's one of his names. Another name was Al Faruq, radiyallahu anh. Okay, Al Faruq, which means the criterion, or means the distinguishing factor. Okay, so this is because he showed his Islam openly in Makkah. Okay, and through him Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala distinguished between disbelief and faith. So we see how Umar Radhan was famous for his name. That was one of the nicknames, Al Faruq, the distinguisher between haqq and batil, between truth and falsehood. Another name of Umar Radhan, or nickname of Umar Radhan, was Amirul Mu'mineen. Okay, the leader of the believers, and he got this when he became a Khalifa. So we know that Abu Bakr Siddiq Radhan was called Khalifatu Rasulillah, so it's meaning the successor of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And then when Umar Radhan became the Khalifa, he was the second Khalifa, he was to be known as Khalifatu Khalifati Rasulillah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And you can just imagine that next, when Uthman Radhan and the next Khalifa Ali Radhan, then the next and the next and the next, it will be a long name. You'll be spending hours, just saying the name Khalifatu, 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 Khalif. You keep on adding to it. So it became very difficult. It was something that was difficult. So one of the people said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, oh the leader of the Mu'mineen, Amir al-Mu'mineen. So when he said this, Umar Radhan, he liked this name, and he started to be called Amir al-Mu'mineen after that. Now we know about the Islam of Umar Radhan, that he was 27 years old when the Prophet ﷺ started propagating Islam, when the revelation started. And Umar Radhan, in the beginning, he was actually fully opposed to Islam. Okay, so he's fully opposed to Islam in the beginning, not because the teachings of Islam were false in his opinion, or that he disagreed with the teaching of Islam. Well, it was because he felt that it brought a fitna to Makkah Mukarramah, and he saw that father was fighting son, brother against brother, and the people were going against the traditions of their forefathers, and he saw this as a threat to society. So because of that, he opposed Islam. We know that Umar Radhan, there was a slave girl, I believe her name was Zunaira radiallahu anha, if I'm not mistaken. He would beat her so much. He would beat her so much that that she would, he would beat her so much that he would actually get tired from beating her, and then he would stop and he would tell her that, don't think I'm feeling sorry for you. I'm not stopping because I feel sorry for you and I don't want to beat you anymore. But the reason why I'm stopping is because I'm tired. So I'm gonna go and rest. I'm gonna go sleep. I'm gonna go get my nice rest, and I'm gonna come back tomorrow morning. Just see 6 o'clock in the morning, or for example, early a.m. I'll be back and I'll be here to beat you again. So you see how Umar Radan would, how he would, his anger and his staunchness was against the Muslims and against Islam in the beginning. Now one day, after seeing this fitna in his eyes spreading through Makkah Mukarramah, he felt that he needs to bring an end to this. So he says, and the narration is there by Umar Radha himself, and other Sahaba narrate this hadith, where Umar Radhan, he went one day, he took out his sword, unsheathed sword, and he went out to look for the Prophet. He said that basically today is the day that either uh, either he dies or I die, or basically, he knew that he's gonna die. He knew that if he goes and kills the Prophet ﷺ, the Banu Hashim, the tribe of the Prophet ﷺ, will not let him live. They'll kill him. So he was ready to do that in his mind, in order to stop the fitna that was spreading in Makkah. So he goes out with his sword. He's walking, and a Sahabi who had, and one of his friends, actually Nu'aym ibn Abdullah radhiallahu, and Umar radhan and others did not know he was secretly a Muslim, so they didn't know he was Muslim. And Nu'aym radhan, he says to him, he goes, Ila'in, where are you going? And he saw him with his sword, so he was worried. He's like, where is he going with his sword like that? And he saw, the fierceness in his eyes, so he knew he's up to something. So he says, where are you going? And he says, I'm going out to kill that Muhammad. Going out to kill that person who's causing all this fitna. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So Nu'aym, he kind of panicked. He didn't know, he was scared that he might harm the Prophet ﷺ. So he diverted his attention by saying that, oh Umar, you're talking about killing the Prophet, you're killing Muhammad ﷺ, but what about your own family? Your own sister has become Muslim. So he diverted his attention, and Umar radhiallahu right then, he is engulfed with rage. He's enraged by hearing this news, and he changes his direction. He goes straight to his house, and as he goes to his house, he could hear them studying something or reciting something inside, but he starts to bang on the door. Now, as he does that, we know that Khabbab radharan, Khubayb radharan was one of the Sahaba. He was teaching the sister and her husband the Quran. They had some of the verses of Surah Taha, and right away the Sahabi went and he hid in one of the rooms, or behind some of the furniture or something. And Umar radharan, they open the door for him. He comes in and he says to them that, is it true that you guys have become Muslim? And the husband, meaning the brother-in-law of Umar Radhan, um, he's actually also a relative. The father of Umar bin Khattab Radhan was the cousin of the father of Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufail. So sorry, Sa'id ibn Zayd ibn Amr ibn Nufail. So the father actually, no, actually I won't talk about that. Something I don't go off topic, but you have Sa'id ibn Amr radhan. He was the Sa'id ibn Zayd radhan. He was the Sahabi who was married to Fatima, the sister of Umar bin Khattab, and he says yes, it's true. And right then Umar radhan actually pounces on him, and he starts to beat him and beat him and beat him. He's on top of him, and he's basically pounding on him, on his brother-in-law. And then his sister comes forward to protect her husband, and he actually smacks her sister also, and she starts to bleed on her lips or on her face. And Umar Radhan, seeing the blood from his sister's face, he calms down a little bit and he gets off the brother-in-law. And he is surprised also that his sister says to him that, do whatever you wish. We're not scared of you, and we're not scared of your people, your the mushrikeen. Do whatever you can, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will prevail, the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will prevail. So he was amazed by this too, that his sister is actually talking back to him like that, and she's being so courageous like that. So Umar Radhan calms down. He goes, "What were you guys doing before I came? You guys were reciting something." And he saw the the parchment or the paper, or, the leather or something that was had the Quran written on it. So he says, "What is that?" Emotions toward it. And she says, "No, you're not allowed." She tries to hide it, and she says, "You're not allowed to touch this." He says, "Why is that?" She says, "Because you are from the mushrikeen, you are najis." So he actually goes and does ghusl at her. She advises him, go and do ghusl and then you can touch it. So he goes and does ghusl. He starts to read Surah Taha, and automatically he's overcome with emotion and overcome with iman. The iman settles in his heart. And this is not the first time. Actually, there was another incident where, for example, he was. It's mentioned that he's drunk, and Umar Radhan was drunk, and he was walking around, and he actually heard the Prophet ﷺ reading Salat al-Tahajjud prayer, and he was reciting the Quran. So Umar Radhan secretly goes to listen, and he listened to part of the Quran, and that also touched his heart. So he knew, in his heart, he felt some, the seeds of Iman starting. And then when he read Surah Taha himself, seeing it and looking at it and reading it himself, he was overcome with Iman, and his tears flow down his cheeks. Now Umar goes, and he goes straight to Darul Arqam, and he still had his sword with him. He still has his sword in his hand. And Hamza Radhan, who just became Muslim right before Umar. So Umar Radhan was actually the 40th Muslim. So you have Hamza Radhan the 39th, and then Umar Radhan was the 40th Muslim. And Umar Radhan knocks on the door, and the Sahaba who were there in Darul Arqam, they kind of became afraid. They said, "This is Umar." And Hamza Radhan says, so what if it's Umar? Let him in. If he intends evil, then we will intend evil and we will kill him with his own sword. If he wants otherwise, then we will act in the same kind. We will act with him with mercy and goodness with him also. So they let him in, and the Prophet ﷺ actually grabs Umar Radhan and shakes him really hard and says to him that, "Isn't it time, O Umar, isn't it time for you to become Muslim?" And Umar Radhan, with tears in his eyes, he says, "Ya Rasulullah, I've come to say the Shahada." And he says the Shahada, and the Prophet ﷺ says Takbir loudly. And the Sahaba around, they all said Takbir loudly. And they said it so loud that they had to disperse. The Prophet ﷺ told them, "Okay, everyone go home, because now if the Quraysh come and try to find out where the people and they find us gathered here, you guys will be in trouble." So he tells them to disperse, and they all go to their own homes. Now, Umar, after he became Muslim, he couldn't keep quiet. Okay, he couldn't keep his iman a secret. So the next day, or even maybe even the same day, he actually goes to the early morning. He goes to the house of Abu Jahl, one of his uncles. He knocks on the door, and his uncle opens the door. He says, "Is khair? Like, everything okay?" And he says, "Oh, yeah, yeah, good morning." He says, "Did you hear the news?" He says, "No, what is that?" He said, "Aslamt, I have become Muslim." And his uncle Abu Jahl, remember, he was a staunch enemy of Islam. He says to him, he goes, "La tafal, don't do that. You didn't do that. Don't tell me you did that." He says, "No, no, I did it. It's true." Abu Jahl slams the door in his face, and he says, "You ruined my day, basically." And then after that, that was not enough. Umar Radhan goes, and he says that, who is there that has spreads the news of, we have people in the community, they hear some kind of piece of news, or ghiba, for example, or backbiters, or whatever. They hear some kind of news from about someone, and then they're the fastest to spread it. Everyone knows about it the next day. So he goes and he finds the person, and he says to him that, "Guess what, did you hear the news?" He said, "No, what's the news?" He says, "Aslamt, I have become Muslim." And this man gets up. He said before Umar Radhan could even finish his sentence, he said he got up and ran towards the Kaaba and starts calling out that Saba, meaning that Umar Radhan he has left his religion. He has left the religion of his forefathers. And Umar Radhan is following after. Abdullah ibn Umar Radhan is the one relating this hadith. He says, "My father was running after him and saying to him that, Kadhabt, Ya Adu Allah, that you have lied, O the enemy of Allah. Aslamt, I did not like I did not leave the religion, but I instead, Bal Aslamt, I have become Muslim." So then he does that, and the people actually pounce on him. They start beating Umar Radhan. They start beating, and everyone comes. That Umar, you have become Muslim. So they come and they start beating Umar radiallahu, and so much so that he at one point he grabs one of the mushrikeen, and he actually puts his thumb on that on the eye of that mushrik, and he says to him, and he says to the people, he tells the people, sorry, he says to this mushrik that call them off. This was one of the leaders of the mushrikeen. He says, call them off, or you're gonna lose your eyes. Basically, I'm gonna poke your eye out. So he says, call them off, and then the man would call them to, like, okay, everyone stop beating Umar Radan. And then he went, and this happened again, the next day. He came back, and the same thing happened again, the same thing. So you had this go on from morning to the evening. He kept on fighting the people, and he kept on grabbing someone of the mushrikeen, and threatening to poke their eye out. So you see how Umar Radan did not keep his Islam secret. And we see Abdullah bin Masud Radan, famous saying of Abdullah bin Masud Radan. He says that Kana Islamu Fathan, that the Islam of Umar Radan was a fath, it was a conquest. Wa hijratuhu Nasra, and his hijrah was a victory for the Muslims. Wa imaratuhu Rahma, and his khilafah, or his leadership was a rahma, was a mercy and blessing for the ummah, for the people. And Abdullah bin Masud Radan also mentions that we were not able to pray openly next to the Kaaba until after Umar Radiallahu became Muslim. So we see how it was a fath, it was a conquest, that when he became Muslim, the Muslims were able to openly go and pray into next to the Kaaba. One thing we know, Umar Radiallahu, that when the Prophet ﷺ ordered the Muslims to make hijrah, to migrate to Medina Munawwara, so he ordered them to do it in secrecy, because they have, they're under threat of being captured, tortured, and whatnot. So he told them that do it in secrecy. So most of the Muslims, majority of the Muslims left in secrecy, and they went to Medina Munawwar. Now Umar bin Khattab radhiallahu himself, he was a different, he was a different case. He was not afraid of them, and he was actually ready to fight. So one day, when he was ready for hijrah, he got his camel ready, he got his belongings ready, everything ready. Then he put on his armor, and then he put his sword on, he put his bow and arrow on, and he goes to the Kaaba. He makes tawaf of the Kaaba, and after making tawaf of the Kaaba, Umar Radan calls out to the mushrikeen, and he says that I am going for hijrah. He openly said it to them, that I am going for hijrah just now. I'm going for Umrah, for hijrah, and if anyone has the courage, that they want, if anybody wants to lose their sorry, to make their children orphans, or he wants to make their wives widows, and they have the courage to face me, then they should come behind the valley and face me in a duel, meaning come and fight me. And no one dared to even stand up to Umar radhiallahu anh, because they were afraid of his strength, of how strong he was. Excuse me. So some more of his merits. We know that the Prophet ﷺ said about Umar radhiallahu anh, that if there was to be a prophet after me, then it would be Umar radhiallahu anh. So meaning the Prophet ﷺ said that if, meaning there's no la nabiyya ba'di. Prophet ﷺ said, goes on to say that there's no prophet after me. He said if there was to be a prophet after me, it would have been Umar bin Khattab radhiallahu anh. That's because of his father, his special status, and his knowledge, his wisdom, and his deen, his practicing of the deen. Now, one other time, the Prophet ﷺ, he was sitting with the Sahaba, and he was talking about Munkar and Nakir. So Munkar and Nakir are the two angels that will visit each one of us when we get into the grave, and they will come and ask us three questions. That Ma dinuk, what is your religion? Okay, man rabbuk, who is your Lord? And what do you say about this man? Meaning about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Umar radhan, he was hearing this, and he says to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that will we have our intellect at that time? Will we have our conscience and our intellect at that time? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam responds by saying yes, you will have it. And Umar radhan says, then that's enough, meaning that what's it called? I will be, that'll be enough for me to take care of them, basically. And we see that the Prophet after that he said that to Umar, how will you be in the grave when Munkar and Nakir come to visit you, and when they ask you, Man Rabbuk, who's your Lord, and you will say to them, Rabbi Allah, Man Rabbukuma. That Umar will say to them that my Rabb is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but who is your Lord? And he'll ask them, and they'll be looking at each other like, is he asking the questions or we're asking the questions? And then they'll say, what is your deen? What is your religion? He says, Dini Islam, ma dinukuma. What is your religion? He's going to say, my religion is Islam, what's your religion? So you see that Munkar and Nakir, they'll be confused. Are we sent to ask him? Or was he sent? Was he supposed to be asking us the questions? So we see that Umar radiallahu anh, his deen, the how much he had practiced, and the iman and faith that he had in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another thing we know is the opinions. There was many times where his opinions matched revelation, matched the wahi, the revelation. And Imam Suyuti rahimahullah, he actually gathers, he states that another scholar in one of his books, Fadail Imamain, the merits of the two Imams, Abu Bakr Siddiq and Umar radiallahu anh, where there's about 20 different points, 20 different situations where the opinion of Umar radiallahu anh matched the wahi, matched the revelation. Okay, so that was Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh. For example, you have the Maqam Ibrahim, where he says to the Prophet that why don't we take Maqam Ibrahim as a musalla, as a place of prayer, and then the ayah came down that take the Maqam Ibrahim as a musalla. Also, you have the divine verses, or the verse of hijab, where Umar radiallahu, he says to the Prophet ﷺ that your wives go out, and then they people are around, and they someone with evil thoughts, or evil an evil person basically might look upon them, and shortly after the ayat were revealed with the hijab, regarding hijab. Also, the prisoners of Badr. So we have Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, when he was asked his opinion. So Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh was gave the opinion that the prisoners of war of the Mushrikeen that they caught in Badr, that they should be given ransom back to their relatives, and that the Muslims can use, that ransom money, and it would help the poor amongst Muslims. And the Prophet ﷺ actually took that advice. The advice that Umar, on the other hand, he had given was that no, we should hand everyone, the Muslims, hand them their own relatives, people from their own tribes and relatives. So there's no retribution and revenge or anything like that. But they should be given to their own relatives, and they should execute their own relatives, because these mushrikeen fought against us, and and this will send a strong signal against the mushrikeen. Now, Rasulullah SAW took the opinion of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh, and the next morning, Umar radiallahu anh came upon Rasulullah SAW and Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh, and he saw them, they were crying, both of them were crying, and Umar radiallahu anh says to them that, what's wrong? And they kept on weeping, they were crying, and the Umar radiallahu anh says, please tell me what's wrong so I can share in your grief. And the Prophet ﷺ actually responds by saying that the azab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had come as close as this tree. So there was a certain tree there, as close as this tree. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that if it wasn't for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this azab would have engulfed the Muslims, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, basically it did not behove the Muslims to take ransom, but they should have instead done what Umar said, and executed the mushrikeen after the battle. So that was another example. Another example was the Janazah of Abdullah ibn Ubay. So you have Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, who was the leader of the Munafiqeen. And this leader of the Munafiqeen, we know how many countless times where he attacked the Prophet ﷺ, verbally, not only the Prophet but the family of the Prophet. Aisha radiallahu anha, the ifk against Aisha radiallahu anha was started by Abdullah ibn Ubay. So you see how he was an enemy of Islam. And Umar radiallahu anhu, he actually was standing there where the janazah, the body, the mayyit, the Abdullah ibn Ubay was prepared for burial, and the Prophet ﷺ came forward and he was about to start the prayer to pray upon this man. And Umar actually tried to persuade the Prophet ﷺ not to pray. He said that this is, you know who this is, right? This is Abdullah ibn Ubay, the one who did, and he started recounting different events and different things that Abdullah ibn Ubay did against the Muslims. So he says to the Prophet ﷺ that this is Abdullah ibn Ubay when he did this and this and this and this against you. And the Prophet ﷺ says that uh, I have a khira, basically I have a choice that I can pray for him or not pray for him. So even if I know that by praying over him 71 times, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive him, I will do that. I will try to do that. So then the Prophet went ahead and he actually prayed over Abdullah ibn Ubay, the hypocrite, and Umar also prayed behind the Prophet ﷺ, but the wahi came after that do not pray over these people, do not pray over the hypocrites. So that was another incident that happened where the wahi was in line with what the opinion of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh. Some other merits of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, we know if you look at this picture here, it's not a clear picture. I should have got a okay, so it's not a clear picture, but this is actually the mountain of Uhud. Okay, Jabal Uhud, and one of the narrations, it's by Anas ibn Malik radhiallahu anh. He says that the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr Siddiq and Umar and Uthman radiallahu anhum ajma'in, they all climbed upon the mountain of Uhud, and farajafa bihim, meaning that Uhud started to shake in joy over the because of the messenger of Sallallahu is upon it. You have remember the Prophet Sallallahu said in another hadith when he was coming back from Tabuk, he looked upon Uhud and he said, "Hada jabalun yuhibbuna wa nuhibbu," that this is a mountain that loves us, meaning loves the mu'mineen, loves the Muslims, the believers, and we love it. So a sign of Iman is love of the Jabal of Uhud. Okay, and you might think like, what do you mean a mountain? But yes, this is a sign of Iman, is that we love the Jabal of Uhud. So this Jabal Uhud itself, we know that all the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are alive in some sense. So we have Uhud starts to feel joy that the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr Siddiq and Umar and Uthman radiallahu anhum ajma'in, they are upon it. So Jabal Uhud actually starts to shake in joy, and the Prophet ﷺ, he basically puts his foot down. You could say stomps his feet or puts his foot down, and he says, "Uthbut Uhud, فإنما عليك نبي وصديق وشهيدان." That stay still, don't shake, stay still, for verily upon you is a Nabi, meaning a messenger of or a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a Siddiq, this is meaning Abu Bakr Siddiq, and then the Shahidan, excuse me, the two martyrs, and that is Umar bin Khattab and Uthman radiallahu anhum. So that was one of the merits that the Prophet ﷺ actually gave the bashara, gave the glad tidings to Umar Radan that he will be a shaheed, he will die as a martyr. Another incident that happened, a famous incident where the Prophet ﷺ, saw in Jannah. So one opinion is that this was when he was physically in Jannah during Isra wal Mi'raj. That's one opinion. Another opinion was it was later on where he saw a dream about Jannah. So the Prophet ﷺ says that he was in Jannah and he saw that there was a huge palace, and he asked the angel that who is this for? And they said this is for a Qurashi, for a person from Quraysh. So the Prophet ﷺ said, I thought that meant me because it was a huge palace. So the Prophet ﷺ says that I went forward and there was a woman there who was doing wudu. She was doing wudu. She was washing her arms or something. She was doing wudu there, and a beautiful from the Hur al-Ain. And the Prophet ﷺ said, I went forward to go and see this palace. And then Jibreel alayhi said to him that this is for Umar, meaning this palace is not yours, this is the palace of Umar bin Khattab radhan. The Prophet says, right away, I turned my eyes away because I remembered the ghira of Umar radhan, the, uh, The ghira is like the I can't translate that right now. I forgot the translation of that, but it's basically it's like when you feel when you feel protective, it's like a protective of something of yours. So the Prophet ﷺ said that I felt because of the ghira. I remember the ghira of Umar Radan, and that's why I looked away. And Umar Radan was weeping; he was crying at that time. Once again, because he was giving glad tidings of being in Jannah and a huge palace in Jannah. And he says, "Ya Rasulullah, not from you, not from you," meaning I don't have ghira from you. Uh, so Umar Radan was given that promise of a palace in Jannah, a huge palace in Jannah. And going on, this just to mention one thing, the hadith of of Umar Radan, where he mentions that the Prophet ﷺ was sitting with the Sahaba, and he told them that the one who recites Surah Al-Ikhlas 10 times will get a palace in Jannah. And Umar Radan, being one of those who were sitting there, he says to Rasulullah ﷺ, that if that's the case, then we are going to increase in our recitation of Surah Ikhlas. And the Prophet ﷺ says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give you even more. Meaning, no matter how much you recite, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can keep on giving you and giving you. So, this is a famous hadith related by Umar Radan that 10 times you recite Surah Al Ikhlas and you will get a palace in Jannah, inshallah ta'ala. Another thing about the fadail, the merits of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, is that the dreams that were seen about him. Okay, the dreams that were seen about him. And I'm going to try to hurry up. Again, we're at about 48 minutes already. So I'm trying to get everything done, inshallah. So we see, for example, the dreams the Prophet ﷺ saw in regards to Umar radiallahu anh. One of them, he says that while he was sleeping, the Prophet ﷺ, while I was sleeping, I saw people displayed before me. People came up in front of me, and they were wearing shirts. So he says that some of them had shirts that were coming. They were short. They were coming up to their chests. Okay, so basically their belly and like they were showing. That was just how it was. And some were even below that, and some of them were going down. And then he said that I saw Umar bin Khattab pass by, and his shirt was dragging behind him, meaning he had a very long shirt on and it was being dragged behind him. So the Muslims asked the Prophet ﷺ that what do you say about this, that ma awalta, that how did you interpret this dream? And the Prophet ﷺ said that this is the deen, ad-deen, meaning that this is the religion, this is the how the Umar was following the deen of Islam. So that was one dream. Another dream the Prophet ﷺ saw was that he was given a glass of milk to drink. And the Prophet ﷺ says that I started to drink from this glass of milk, and he drank from it until he saw that the milk started coming out from the fingertips. So he was so full of this milk that it started coming out of his fingertips. And then the Prophet ﷺ was asked that how did you interpret this dream? And the Prophet said, oh sorry, before that, Rasulullah ﷺ said that it came out of my fingertips, and then I gave the remaining milk of that glass to Umar bin Khattab radhiallahu anh. So the son of Umar, Abdullah bin Umar, he's the one relaying this hadith. He asked the Prophet, how did ma awwalta, how did you interpret this? And the Prophet says that this is knowledge. Okay, so if someone sees themselves drinking milk in a dream or sees someone else drinking milk in a dream, that is interpreted as knowledge. So that was one of the merits of Umar radhiallahu anh. Another dream that the Prophet ﷺ saw, he said that while I was sleeping, I saw myself standing at a well over which there was a bucket. Okay, so there was a well and there was a bucket over this well. And he says that I pulled out as many buckets of water as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wished from it. And then he says that after that, Ibn Abi Quhafa, meaning Abu Bakr Siddiq, he came, he took the bucket from me and he pulled out one or two full buckets. And then he says that, but there was some weakness in his pull. And then he says, may Allah forgive him. Excuse me. Then the bucket turned into a very large bucket, and Umar Radhan came and took the bucket, and he started taking from the water, taking out water from the well. And the Prophet ﷺ says, I have never seen anyone draw water with such strength as Umar drew the strength. So it was even a larger bucket, and he was drawing it out with strength. The Prophet ﷺ says, until the people drank to their satisfaction and watered their camels to their fill, whereupon the camels sat beside the water. So the Prophet ﷺ says, told them about this dream, and this was interpreted as being the Khilafah. So you have, this is Sahih Hadith, okay, and again this pointing towards the fact that Abu Bakr will become the Khalifa of the Prophet ﷺ, and then Umar after him. So you see, uh, Umar taking the amount of, and the ulama say this is the blessings and the barakat that the Prophet that Umar uh, uh, had during his Khilafah, and the Muslims enjoyed during the Khilafah of Umar radiallahu anhu. There's actually another dream that's related by Auf ibn Malik radiallahu anh, this is a Sahabi. He saw about Umar radiallahu anh, and this was during the Khilafah of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh. So this this Sahabi Auf ibn Malik radiallahu anh, he saw this dream during the time of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh, and he said that he saw in it that the people had come, and there was they've come around the mimbar, and he actually says there was three characteristics of Umar. And Umar actually at that point, he stops him right then. He says that uh, uh, because he was actually relating his dream to Abu Bakr Siddiq, and Umar stopped him and said to him that, we don't need your dream, we don't need to hear about this dream while we have Abu Bakr Siddiq alive. And actually, the reason why he said that was there was three things that were mentioned about that were interpreted or seen in the dream. Number one, that Umar radiallahu an, he's going to be basically he's famous for three things. He will achieve three things. Number one is that he will become a Khalif. He will become a Khalifa. He will become a Caliph. And that was after. So that's why he actually stopped him from relating the hadith, the dream to Abu Bakr Siddiq. And number two, that لا يخاف لومة لائم. He will not fear the criticism of the people who criticize. So he will not fear anyone except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is one of the traits that we should try to inculcate, that we should become of those. Don't care about what people say, don't care about what people may mock you or say anything against you, as long as you're doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants of you and what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't la la nakhaf, we shouldn't fear lawmat al-la'imin, we shouldn't fear the criticism that might be thrown against us. Okay, and the third is that that was in the dream, is that he will die as a martyr. So these are the three things that Auf ibn Malik saw in his dream. Going on to the taqwa of Umar Radhan. So we know that Umar Radhan during his Khilafah, he would go out in disguise. He would go out in disguise, not being recognized. He would, wrap himself and go out secretly with his servant, sometimes by himself, and he would go and check on the Muslims, make sure everything's okay in the Ummah in Medina Munawwara. So one day he stood guard at night over some travelers to make sure that they're okay and they have everything they need. If they need anything, he'll go and get it for them. And there was a baby that was crying. There was a woman who had a baby, and the baby was crying, and she was trying to keep it quiet, but it wouldn't stop. It wouldn't stop crying. So Umar then actually goes to her and says to him that, "What are you doing? Why can't you stop the baby from crying?" And she says that, "I am trying to wean the child." And he said that, "Why are you trying to wean the child?" And she said, "Because Umar, the Khalifa," she didn't recognize him, she didn't know it was Umar Radhan. She says, "Because the Khalifa, Amir al-Mu'minin Umar Radhan, has given a stipend for those who have children that are weaned," meaning that after the age of drinking milk, when they start eating food, and then the Umar Radhan, from the state, they would give a stipend to these people. So she was trying to wean her child so that she can get that stipend, meaning she was poor. She didn't have wealth, and she was trying to wean her child off the milk so that they can go and get stipend from the government. So Umar Radhan started crying, and he actually changed his decree right then. He said that no matter if the child is weaned or unweaned, everyone will get stipend from the government. So that's one, that's one, and he feared that, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might ask him that why did you do this to them? Why did you, force the women to wean their children early? So he changed his order after that. Another thing was Umar Radiallahu was going out one night, and as he's going out, he sees towards the outskirts of Medina Munawwara, he sees a fire. So he goes towards the fire to see what's going on, what's up, if they need anything, and he sees a woman with her small children, and the children are crying. The children are crying, and the mother is trying to put them to sleep. And Umar then goes forward and asks her that what's going on? Why are you not? She had a pot, and she was boiling something. So he says to her that, what are you doing? Why aren't you feeding them? What do you have cooking here? And why don't you feed them so they can stop crying? And she says that there's nothing in the pot except water. I'm boiling water, and the reason why she was doing that, she was saying that I have nothing to give my kids to eat or drink except water. That's all I have. So I'm boiling this, and she was telling them that, try to, maybe they'll get tired and they'll go to sleep because I have nothing to give them. So she kept on doing that, and Umar Radiallahu started crying right away, and he went straight back. He raced back to Baitul Mal, and he grabbed those bags of flour, and he went and got some fat, and he got some meat, and he came back, and he gave it to her to cook. And not only just he gave it to her, but he himself sat down and started kneading the dough and start preparing the food. And then he started doing it. And actually the I believe it was Aslam radiallahu anh, again, the servant, he said that until I saw the smoke going through the beard of Umar Radiallahu anh. That's how he was sitting, and he was blowing over the fire, and he was cooking. And after he did that, he gets up and he leaves, and he does not go back to Medina. He stops and hides behind a rock, and he sits there. And then the servant asked him that, what are you doing? Why are we still here? You've done your duty. You gave them the food. And Umar Radiallahu anh says that I want to see the kids laugh and play just like I saw them crying. And one thing I forgot to mention is that when Umar had gone to Baitul Mal, he went and he asked the servant, help me put it on my back so I can carry these sacks of flour and the fat and food and all this stuff. And the servant said, no, no, yeah, Amirul, let me carry it for you. And Amirul Mu'mineen Umar says to him that, will you be able to carry my burden on the day of judgment? So let me carry my own burden. So we see how much fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Umar Radiallahu had. Also another time where Umar Radiallahu he's describing a delicious meal that the people would eat. So he talked about something like, people said to him like, why are you eating this dried up bread and just with oil or something, and very simple bread and barely eating anything. So Umar Radiallahu says, do you think I don't know about good food? And then he goes on to describe a very good meal that the people would eat, and he describes it in a beautiful way that probably made the people hungry just listening to it. And Umar then says that I could do that, I could eat that, but the people around me, the people under my command, they are not afforded the luxury of eating the good food, so I cannot eat it until they eat it. Meaning, I will not eat the good food until everyone is able to eat the good food. Also, another incident, and I'll go on inshallah, is Uthman in the dead of the heat, in the sun, in the summer, and in the daytime, he saw a man coming from a distance, bringing a camel back, or a goat or sheep or something. He was bringing it back, and Uthman sees that. So Umar, he says, "What are you doing? Why didn't you send a servant, or you could have told me, or I could have went out and someone could have done this? Or what? Yeah, why did you go out yourself?" He says that I was afraid that I would be asked about this animal on the day of judgment. So that's why he went out. It was a stray animal. He went and got it himself and brought it back. Excuse me. One of the merits of Umar Radhan, we know that Jerusalem, the keys to Jerusalem. Again, I'm sorry about the picture. It's not high definition. I should have checked that. But Umar Radhan was given the keys to Jerusalem, and this is something that actually he was mentioned in the books of the Christians in their books. It was mentioned that a man will come and he will be one of the companions of the last prophet, and he will have such and such patches in his clothing, and he'll come and you give him the keys of Jerusalem. So during the Khilafah of Umar radiallahu anh, he was summoned to Jerusalem by the Christians and by the head priest and them, and they said, we will give the keys to the city to Umar radiallahu anh, to the Khalifa, if he comes himself. So Umar radiallahu anh was traveling, and as he's traveling, we know that he and his servant were taking turns on one camel. So they had one camel, and they're taking turns riding the camel. When they got to Jerusalem, when they were about to enter the city, Umar radiallahu anh, it was the turn of the servant. So Umar radiallahu anh, says to the servant, "Okay, it's your turn to ride the camel." He says, "No, no, no. It doesn't look good. We're going into the city, and it's my turn. Fine, but I give up my turn. Just you go ahead and sit." Umar then insists that no, it's your turn, so you're gonna sit. You're gonna say, "I don't care about what people think." Again, la yakhafu lawmatal la'imin. He doesn't care about what people think. He cares what is justice, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. So he says that you go ahead, you sit. This is your turn. They continue on. Abu Ubaidah, I believe it was Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah, he comes out to meet Amir al-Mu'mineen, and he says to Amir al-Mu'mineen that why don't I give you some clothes to wear, because you have patches on your clothing, and why don't I give you some new clothing to wear, because it doesn't look good that we come into the city and you're being given the keys of Jerusalem and you're wearing patched up clothing. Amir al-Mu'min Radhan gets so upset at Abu Ubaidah Radhan. He says to him that if it wasn't because of your high status and your position with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I would have beat you right now. I would have beaten you because of these words you said. And then he said his famous statement where Umar Radhan says, "Nahnu qawman, we are a people, a'azzana Allah bil Islam. Allah SWT has given us izzah, respect and honor and dignity through Islam. فإن ابتغينا العزة بغيره أذلنا الله." That if we try to go and seek izzah, seek honor and dignity from other than Islam, then Allah SWT will disgrace us. That was the famous saying of Umar radiallahu anh at the at the incident of Jerusalem. And then he was given the keys after that without any bloodshed. Another thing is the justice of Umar radiallahu anh. So we know that Umar radiallahu anh, he was the one who established the calendar based on the Hijri calendar. Also, social welfare, I talked about that a little bit. They would give out stipends. There was actually, we're talking about nowadays because of COVID and stuff. We have this. We were talking about this the other day. Actually, is I think they're still giving it. I'm not sure, but it was $600 a week for the unemployment, right? And we were just joking about this, that there's people out there. I know for sure. I know people that on purpose they're not going back to work because they're getting so much. They're getting even more than they can make while working. And anyway, so one of the things is that Umar Radhan was the one who started this. He's the one who started. He would give, and they're like a retirement system. For example, when people would get old, they would get a stipend from the government because they're not able to work anymore. They're old. So that was established by Umar Radhan, and that was for non-Muslims and Muslims alike. That was for everyone. Also justice in regards to his governors. So there was a famous incident. Again, I know I'm going over. I just want to wrap up, inshallah. But you have Amr bin As. He was one of the governors of Egypt, of Misr, and one day a Egyptian Copt. So he was basically a Christian from the Egyptians, from the area. He came and he complained to Umar about the son of Amr ibn As. The son of Amr ibn As actually was racing. He said, I was racing with him with camels. They were racing camels. And he said, I beat him. My camel beat his camel. But then he came and he took out his whip and he started beating me with his whip. And he said that, here, take this from the son of the noble people. So he beat him like this. So Umar became infuriated, and he wrote a letter to Amr bin As that you come with your son as soon as possible, come right away. So they came to Medina Munawwara, and Umar called the Egyptian and he said to him, now you beat this man, the son of Amr bin As, and he took the whip and he started beating him and beating him and beating him until one of the Sahaba that were standing there, he said that we felt bad that the son of Amr was beaten so much. That's how much they felt. And then Umar says to the Egyptian, the Copt, he says to him that, okay, now take this whip and beat the father, meaning beat Amr ibn As, the Sahabi Amr ibn As beat him on his bald head because how could he let something like this happen under his rule? Meaning he was the governor, so how could he let something like this happen? And the Egyptians said, "No, I got my retribution, so that's enough." And then Umar Radhan turns to Umar Radhan. He says to him that, "Since when did you enslave the people when their mothers have uh, given birth to them while they were free?" So that was a famous incident of the justice of Umar Radhan. Going on, one of the incidents that happened, there was a Roman that one of the messengers of the Romans came to to Medina Munawwara. He was looking for Umar Radhan, and they pointed towards a man, resting under the tree. So this man goes and he says, like, he's like, "Don't joke with me. This is not your leader. Where's your leader?" And he said, "No, that's him. That's Amir al-Mu'minin. That's Umar bin Khattab." He was sleeping under the tree and he had his sandals under his head and he was taking a rest. He was taking a nap. So this man was bewildered. He's like, "What? How could this be the leader of the Muslims?" And he said a famous saying. He says that. حكمت فعدلت فأمنت فنمت. He says that you ordered and you were just in your orders. So amint, you were safe, and then fanimt, and then you were able to sleep. Meaning that the kings in their palaces with their lush, memory foam pillows, water beds, and whatever not, they are not able to sleep and have good rest because of the fear of revenge, retribution, and whatnot because of all the injustice that they're doing. And this man, because of his justice, he's sitting here under the shade of this tree and he's sleeping with his sandals under his head. So he was just amazed at this. Now going on, inshallah, I'm almost done. Just bear with me, inshallah. So the death of Umar radhiallahu. So we know that Umar radhiallahu, one of the famous du'as that he would repeatedly make is that Allahumma rzuqni shahadatan fi sabilik waj'al mawti fi baladi rasulik sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he would say that, "Oh Allah, give me shahada. Okay, bless me with shahada, meaning bless me to become a martyr and die in your path." And also he'd add to that, "and make me die in Medina Munawwara." Now I believe it was Hafs radhiyallahu anha, she would say to the father that, how is it that you're asking for shahada and you're asking to die in the Prophet's city? How is that possible? Because there's all Muslims, 100% Muslims in Medina. How is that possible that you're gonna and the people, the Sahaba, are out there fighting on the battlefronts, and you're not going out to fight? So how is that possible? But Umar Radhan knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do whatever he wishes, and we see that when he was towards the end of his life, there was a just a couple of days before he died, before he was martyred, there was actually a disagreement that happened with Abu Lu'lu al-Majusi. He was a non-Muslim living. He was, I think, a carpenter or something. So he had a disagreement with one of the Sahaba, and he came to Umar Radhan to complain. Umar Radhan kind of told him, "Okay, just go back. I'll take care of it." And he wasn't happy with what Umar Radhan, even though Umar Radhan talked to the Sahabi after, but he wasn't happy. So what he did is he took a dagger, he poisoned it, and he stood amongst the Muslims. And he actually, right when it was Salatul Fajr, Umar Radhan started the prayer, and as soon as he started the prayer, Umar Radhan, if you look at this picture here in the front, this is the mihrab of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is where Umar Radhan would pray, he would lead the prayer. And Umar Radhan actually was stabbed 6 times while he started Salat al-Fajr. And then Abu Lu'lu, when he turned around, he started running, and they were trying to grab him. He actually stabbed some other of the Sahaba. Few of them even actually died because of the stabbing, and then he killed himself because right before he was caught, he killed himself. So Umar Radhan was bleeding out. He was bleeding to death from this. He was in and out of consciousness. And we see that one of the things that Umar, his son Abdullah bin Umar Radhan, he says that we were trying to wake him up, and he wasn't responding. So he says that I know how to wake him up. And he says in his ear of his father, he says that as-salah, meaning that it's the time of prayer. And right away, Umar would wake up. Even though he was on his throes of death, he woke up because of the fear he had and the position of salah he had in his heart, and he woke up right away. So this is Umar radiallahu anh, and he said that who stabbed me? They said that it was Abu Lu'lu al-Majusi, this non-Muslim, and he said, Alhamdulillah, that I did not die in the hands of a Muslim. So that was one of the things, and he got the shahada that he wanted, and he was buried next to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if you look here, this is where Abu Bakr Siddiq radhan, and to the left of this is where the Prophet ﷺ is buried. Then you have Abu Bakr Siddiq, and then you have Umar bin Khattab radhan. Now, one of the things, and I'll end with this, inshallah. Again, even at the time of his death, the justice of Umar radhan, that he did not want to take what is not his. Okay, so what he did was actually Aisha radhiallahu anha, the mother of believer Ummuna Aisha radhiallahu anha, was planning on keeping. She had kept that position next to her husband and next to her father for herself, in her own, and that's her hujra, that's her own house. So her hujra of Aisha radhiallahu anha, she was planning that when she dies, she's going to be buried next to her father and next to the Prophet. So Umar radhiallahu actually sent his son Abdullah ibn Umar to Aisha anha. He says, go and ask the mother of believers that if she allows, if she permits, I want to be buried next to my two companions. So Abdullah ibn Umar goes and asks Aisha for permission. And Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, I was keeping this position for myself. I wanted to be buried there, but because Umar because Amir al-Mu'minin has asked, then I will give it to him. She gave up for Amir al-Mu'minin radiallahu anhu. Now, Umar before he was passing away, he asked his son to put his face on his cheek on the ground, and then he was calling out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in humility. And then right before he died, he said to his son Abdullah ibn Umar that take my mayyit, take my dead body when I'm washed and everything, whatever, after I'm done. After you're preparing to bury me, take my mayyit and put it in front of the house of Aisha radiallahu anha. If she allows me to go in and be buried next to Abu Bakr Siddiq and the Prophet ﷺ, then take me in. If she changes her mind, then take me to Baqi and bury me in Baqi. Because he was worried that she might have agreed because he was Amir al-Mu'minin. She might have agreed out of being shy to not say no to Umar. So he says that even after I die, then ask her again for permission. If she allows me to be buried, then go ahead and bury me there. If not, then take me to Baqi. So I'll end there, inshallah. We don't have time for questions. I mean, I went over the time. So is there anybody, Rehan, go ahead. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Sorry, yeah.
Can you hear me or?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah. No, I think, does anyone have quick questions? Inshallah, we can, I think, wait one.
Okay. And I apologize, I went over the time again. But
no,
again, it's hard to, put all this information into 1 hour or even.
No, even like me personally, like I'm like just listening here. I'm like, I'm just like, you can be here like for like, we could have a 10-week series and it will still not be enough.
But yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, like I was saying, like there's so many different scholars, mashallah, very knowledgeable scholars, mashallah, have done beautiful lectures on the stories of the Khulafa Rashideen, on the different scholars, and that's, and even in English. And then if you look in the Arabic, what the scholars have done again about the Khulafa, that's even more. So it's mind-boggling how much information is out there.
And just to show you how amazing his story is, like they even made a show out of it too.
Yeah, I forgot to even mention that. And that's actually that's good you mentioned that. So there, I know that some people might be like, okay, are we allowed to watch it or not? There are scholars that say that, a majority of scholars, they say no, you're not supposed to watch that because they're showing the images of the Sahaba and whatnot. But then there's also some scholars, and the ones who actually helped, the ones who were the writers of the script writers of that show, They were actually ulama. They had ulama on this as writers, and their opinion is that we see this day and age where people are watching movies and films and dramas and all this stuff, and why not make something where, like for example, you have the cartoon movies where the last message, and then the famous, the first of all, actually the message, the Arisala that came out in the 70s, I believe.
Yep.
That was the first one, and then these things. So you have the ulama who say that there's benefit in there, and there is benefit. So I myself, yes, I have watched the series, and my kids, alhamdulillah, they watched it with me, and my son actually recently he watched it a second time, and I myself, I can't find time, but I want to watch it again. Inshallah, there's so much to learn and so much you can take from that, inshallah.
Yes,
So barakallah fi.
I totally agree. Like I also watched it, and it's just like emotional, and it just it's easier to read stuff, but when you actually see it, and
Yep.
even in action, it's just so much better. This is the Omar series, inshallah, better.
Yeah,
With that,
it's actually, if you go on islamicity.com, you have to make an account. Islamicity.com or islamicity.org, I think, and you make an account with them, and then they actually have the Arabic with the English subtitles, because the English subtitles are not found on YouTube anymore. They took it off for some reason. But if you go on islamicity.com, you can find that.
inshallah, so I'll stop there.